Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to an episode of Power of Myth and Symbolism in Star Wars. And with me, as always, on this I feel very weird journey is Ty Black. Hi, Ty.
Hi, Marie Claire. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Yes. We live in a post The Rise of Skywalker world, and thus we are still talking about it. But that's okay. I do want to say, this segment specifically looks at Star Wars through a mythic and symbolic lens. And I don't believe that I have ever said that it is anything but that. There is a lot of value to looking at Star Wars through other, especially critical lenses, feminism, deconstructionism, new reader, hey, it's just fun. But this segment specifically looks at Star Wars through a mythic and symbolic lens. The mythic lens that we tend to rely on is the Campbellinian monomyth. And it has been used, I think justifiably so, because of how much the creators themselves talk about it being used as a lens by which they align their stories. And we're going to get into that a little bit. And it's great that people want to use other lenses to examine Star Wars, because I think that Star Wars can only benefit from having more voices and more perspectives to look at, whether this is the story that needs to meet the needs of the people. I look at things from a feminist lens all the time, just to understand, hey, is this actually meeting a significant step forward in the storytelling of our culture to say that things have actually shifted? That all being said, I will be fairly critical of certain aspects of The Rise of Skywalker within this episode. I'm also going to point out many symbolic things that I absolutely dug and were exceptional. Mm-hmm. Ty, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm obviously still very burned by this entire thing. I'm actually, I think on a lot of levels, I'm a lot more, my anger hasn't subsided still a lot. I think maybe that comes from the online interactions as of late. That comes from the stuff that the Reylo fandom in particular has been dealing with. And so I it's hard for me to move on from this one, just because the potential storylines that could have come from this film, so easily could have given so much to the women of the fandom and the men of the fandom as well, because this is not just a woman's story. This is the play between feminine and masculine story.
The ever-present conversation between our sexes.
Exactly.
Is a thing that is even present in our daily lives and could be immensely relevant to how we talk about gender politics in some ways.
Yeah, and I was telling someone this at work the other day, because I had a coworker who basically was just saying that she didn't enjoy, I'm not going to say what it was, but it was a show, and I was kind of defending it, and I was saying, okay, well, that's really not fair to criticize it so hard. And at the end of it, I couldn't figure out why I was so defensive, and then I realized it was because she was dogging it because of the tropes, mainly the romantic tropes. And I was like, look, I just want men to accept these tropes and this romance and this storyline on the mainstream first. Like, that's my goal, because I know that there are shortfalls with this type of thing. I know that maybe it's not done perfectly. Like, I can laugh at it sometimes. But to say it shouldn't exist is erasing me, and it's erasing women's it's erasing the feminine gaze.
Yeah, because it's beyond women. I know tons of men who want to see romantic interplay in their fiction.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's still not accepted on the mainstream. And so that is my goal. Like, that is, I don't know why it's a goal. I don't know what I can do, but I'm just, that's my thing, I guess. And that's what I try to promote, I guess. But anyways, all that being said, that the potential storylines that were put forth for this film by not only the previous films, and all 8,
Yes.
Not only all 8 films building up to this point, but all of the canon that was put out, the comics, the books, everything like that, the potentiality for something great and true and romantic, and that beautiful play between the masculine and the feminine.
Transformative, transcendent. And that's part of my argument, I think.
Yeah.
Is that when the myth works, when the myth speaks to us as a culture, when it plugs into our collective unconscious and to our subconscious, it becomes universally accepted.
Yeah.
And it's not even like it has to be good.
No.
I mean, the prequels arguably have many problems, but it still spoke to the myth and now has become part of our collective unconscious as something that has happened. There are going to be people that are going to be salty about the prequels because of certain aspects of it. And I think that with the potential for recontextualization in a mainstream media effort by Lucasfilm, they could potentially recontextualize the rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. And I know it's going to happen. Not in the way a lot of people are proposing, not in the way, I don't think Ben's coming back. I don't think that's happening. But the things that we will talk about in this episode specifically, I think there's enough there to build off of, because it did leave us with a lot of questions. And what you can do is you can go back and you can, like you say, recontextualize
the Clone Wars
things.
Recontextualized the prequels.
Yeah.
Right? Momentary situations have been recontextualized for us. This is the iterative nature of the storytelling of Star Wars. So, as the example, Hosnian Prime meant nothing to us because J.J. Abrams skipped past the emotional responses. In TFA, one of my largest arguments and things that I hold against The Force Awakens still to this day, going back and actually experiencing it through the eyes of Kaz in the Resistance cartoon actually makes it relevant and feel like a character emotional event. And thus we experience it and we understand that that event was actually quite important. They built a whole timeline in the visual dictionary around Starkiller Base exploding.
Yeah.
Before Starkiller incident, after Starkiller incident. Yeah, like literally they have a timeline around it.
Yeah.
It's just important to talk about and to not overwrite people's feelings on either side of the house. Yeah. We live in a weird house called the eternal dialogue of Star Wars.
Yeah.
People found meaning in this story. It spoke to them, right? And I will never take away people's love of what they found personally. I won't comment on the fact that, that's not justifiable. That's not valid to enjoy something that Star Wars creates. But I do need to be critical of what I feel to be the cuts and slashes and changes to, perhaps, we speculate, what was intended, because you can still see the surgery scars.
Yeah.
Right? So that to me is a different thing. And if you can't come to this conversation with an open mind and you're like, I don't want to hear Marie Claire rip apart the thing that I love. I totally get it. Like, and I'm not going to rip it apart because I'm going to talk about cool symbolism too. But I do need to be critical about certain aspects of it. And it's not because I'm like, I just wanted bed and write a kiss and have a happily ever after. Well, yeah, sure, I did on an emotional level, but literally the myth could have been completed with like one line added to Rey. And I've already talked about that. The myth is, to me, the thing that I view Star Wars through first and foremost. If they had included a line by Rey saying, you know, Poe and Finn, and saying, you know, have I got a story to tell you about Ben Solo? That would have completed the myth for me. It would have showed they had learned from the past, and we're going to get into that later. So it's not about a happily ever after. It's not about, you know, Ben Solo living, as much as I would have liked those things to have happened from a larger transcendent meaning. It's more about that they didn't still land, you know, stick the landing, right?
Yeah. Well, and all of the extra stuff that they decided to add.
Oh, definitely added in.
took away, it took away things from what could have been so powerful and so simple of a message. They decided to muddy the waters even further, and that...
Yeah, like production-wise, they did research shoots up until November and were editing this movie into the last minute. So we don't even know what was potentially originally intended, other than we can see the bones and the structure of the myth underneath.
Yeah.
And like... that, to me, that pivot, that change, we get what we get. But we do need to be critical and analyze what happened and say, hey, you know, I think it would have been better the other way, in my opinion. But it doesn't invalidate other people's experiences, especially if they love the you know, the messaging that was created. Because in some ways, some people, like my friend Liam, walks in, realized it was going to be an absolute just Transformers movie in Star Wars, and sat down, enjoyed the hell out of it from a flashing lights and, you know, experience perspective. Got stuck on a few things like, Rey, you're a Palpatine. He laughed out loud at the theater and then tried to brag about it. But, you know, he still enjoyed himself because it was like, Star Wars is fun lens. And that's okay. That's okay. And you can also be like, Star Wars, you know, Rey experienced things and put it behind her. And, you know, yeah, I can not look at things from a Campbellinian perspective and still get a lot of meaning out of this.
Yeah. But, I just want to say this. Like, people who are really happy they found something out of this, like really honestly just celebrating this story, which I have not run into a lot of these people, right?
There's a few.
There are few and far between for me. But those people should not feel offended by us looking at this critically and saying, we're not nitpicking it. We are not. And some people are going to the extent of nitpicking because they are so incredibly upset with it on so many levels. But the underlying reason isn't because of reasons why, like, the fandom menace had an issue with The Last Jedi. We're not picking apart, like, the fight scenes, the choreography. We're picking apart, like, things that could have been good for us as a society going forward. Like, this was supposed to be something that we could say, hey, this was made for me. This was like The Last Jedi was made for us. And I do feel like there's this weird divide there, and it kills me because I'm not hurting anybody by being upset about this film. You know, I'm not hurting anybody by being upset about this film. But there have been people who were upset about The Last Jedi who were hurting people because a lot of what they were upset about came from them disliking women being present in the film, disliking how women acted in the film. That's the difference.
Different, yeah.
So I really don't like the idea of people going around saying that we are being hypocrites, because our being upset does not come from the same place at all. It's not even close. So
yeah, and like like right away I was like, I'll tolerate this weird thing. I'll learn how to eat you thing. Like I'm literally like, this is my process of learning how to consume something that I loved. I did a thread of 30 plus things I loved about The Rise of Skywalker, and I described it like wanting to hug a teddy bear, which I always, a teddy bear being, an Ewok, Wicket, something I love about Star Wars. My love of Star Wars is this teddy bear. But I said it was a teddy bear made out of knives. Because every time I tried to hug it, something about it felt like it was stabbing me.
Yeah.
And that's a very visceral way of describing my reaction to The Rise of Skywalker, because genuinely there are things in this movie that I absolutely love, and I will go back and I will watch it sometime before it leaves theaters so that I can experience those things in the big theater with the good sound and everything like that. But it doesn't mean that I can ignore the things that are wrong to me about it.
Yeah.
And again, some people call me an expert, and maybe that's just because I have a voice on the internet, but I'm still a student. Yeah. I learn all the time. I read things to become better. I listen to other people's opinions, and I very much try to be a thoughtful participant in the conversation. I am not a hypocrite.
Yeah, it's just not a fair comparison at all.
I want Star Wars to be better.
We wanted to enjoy this film so badly.
Yeah, like I was willing, like if it was like Attack of the Clones level weird dialogue and like awkward as hell, but still completed the Campbellinian monomyth, I would have been so happy.
Oh yeah.
If it had had that one line at the end, happy, happy, happy clam.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of nonsense I would have accepted.
And you know what? The novelization may fill in gaps for me personally, where I will feel the myth has been repaired enough for me to accept it as is. And then the novelization will be my episode 9, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Ray Carson, no pressure.
Yeah.
But for now,
yeah,
I have an incomplete myth.
Yeah.
Not broken. I used the words broken previously. It was only because of the Frankenstein monster that TROS ended up being. But it is incomplete, in my opinion. Yeah, Star Wars iterates. We are here where we are.
Yep.
It may be completed in the future. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Totally.
From a thesis perspective, for this episode, the mythos of TROS, there are identifiable mythic symbols within the text, observable text, but ultimately it falls short of the Campbellinian monomyth and more aligns with the American monomyth.
Yes, which is something that we did talk about in our reaction episode, which was that 2-parter that were released on the same day. And it was so funny because oh my God, it was so late for me on that second part. And you and I, it was an emotional, drunkenness.
We recorded for 5.5 hours.
Yeah, it was a very long time. And my voice had changed at some point, which was hysterical listening back to it. But yeah.
And I edited it terribly in the second part because I was so tired, but I needed it out of me. Sometimes I describe these topics I need it out, it's like poison or something. I need it out. And that's kind of what happened with this. So
that's exactly how I feel when I make videos. So I I understand that. And I do want to, this is one of the things we wanted to do was kind of go off of that a little bit more. So we're going to revisit what the Campbellian monomyth is, and we're going to revisit what the American monomyth is, and talk about, like, really just dig into, like, what the myth in The Rise of Skywalker is and how it fits into the overall myth as well.
Yep. But to start out, we wanted to talk about inferences versus observable symbols.
Oh, yeah. So MC had this funny idea a while back where she said, I want to talk about all of the unintentional symbolism in The Rise of Skywalker because there was so much.
It's really funny.
It is really funny because we were like, well, yeah, there's this. Oh, there's also this. And we kind of came to the conclusion with over and over and over again that it was all unintentional.
Well, some of it I think actually was intentional to the Campbellian monomyth. And we're gonna talk about that because it's like this stuff came up out of like really nowhere. So it's like stitched to the old Campbellian monomyth bones that exist in the movie, knowing that we know that the movie changed at the last minute. We know this. The editors have talked about it. We know what the production schedule was. We know the movie changed.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a surprise that there are things that maybe will remain from the old symbolism that they were trying to say that directly you can trace to words Campbell said.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
And then there's like unintentional symbolism that happens, which we do need to talk about. Like, as an example, Rey wearing white for the whole movie. That very much ties to the American monomyth. Like the woman in the horror movies, which I actually think that TROS leans into the horror genre a little bit.
A lot.
women heroines in horror movies in the American monomyth wear white.
Yeah. And they're usually virgins, so.
Yes. Because, I mean, go and watch Scream. They outline the American monomyth within the genre of horror movies as they talk about it. Because it's a meta on horror movie genre, right? And, the one actor, I forget his name, he's talking about all of the tropes to do with horror movies. And it's like, yeah, and the woman can't have sex or she's going to die because that, she has to be virginal and pure. And, she can't, all of her friends who have had sex will die. It's like, yeah.
He has a point. That's exactly what it is. He has a point.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do want to talk and just like pull it back to say inferences on symbols, i.e., hey, something happened and I, with my personal lens, apply meaning to it, is perfectly awesome. But it does not translate to other people because it is your personal lens. So looking at Rey staring off into the sunset, smiling, will be personal to the person who is seeing it. And this ties into the concept of choose your own adventure, the choose your own adventure genre that TROS ends up aligning to. Observable symbols that are in text, something that happens that we can point to, are much more stable from a collective unconscious perspective and absorbing that into the mythology of our culture.
Yeah.
Example, Vader physically picking up the Emperor, the symbol of evil in Return of the Jedi, and throwing him into a pit, never to be seen again until The Rise of Skywalker. And then dying and atoning for his actions, begging of forgiveness, both from his son and his daughter. Tell your sister you were right. There was still good in me. Observable.
Yeah.
Right? That is, I mean, arguable by some who don't pay attention to the text, but can be pointed to and say, this was a truthful thing that happened.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to bullet point the point of The Rise of Skywalker. What happened when and how with textual evidence. And unfortunately, it doesn't quite align with a true transformative myth.
Yeah. Because if you walk through The Rise of Skywalker, and
without inference, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yes.
You cannot assume something without textual action.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And if you want to do it with The Last Jedi and then do it with The Rise of Skywalker, you can see, because as much as we read into the symbols in The Last Jedi, everything is also being told to you in what is happening. These two people are talking to each other. What conclusion did they come to? You're not, Rey, you're lying to yourself. You think this is what happened. This is not what happened. Let me tell you what actually happened. Aside from all the symbolism that was also happening in that scene, there was something going on for the characters. But when you do it with The Rise of Skywalker, you're going to end up with a lot of bullet points, a lot of sub-bullet points that are going to end up being all plot. It's not going to mean much for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
Without inference.
Without inference, yeah.
Yeah.
You can pull out.
Inference is fine. I can look at a magic eye and get inference.
Yeah.
Right? I can look at a sunrise and get inference because that's my own personal lens. But we're talking about a societal lens which calls to the underlying structure of our psychology as human beings. It plugs into our hardwiring in our brain. And that is where it falls short.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have hope. I have hope they will finish the myth at some point.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's talk about some symbols, because symbols and mythic ties. Rey is a life and death goddess like Kali/Parvati. She has the ability to create, heal others, and also is a kept up rage monster wanting to bring vengeance upon her enemies.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And actually, this is so funny because it kind of skips some, so for the heroine's journey, it both reverses a lot of things that happened in The Last Jedi as well as skips forward to the last steps of the heroine's journey. A woman that has, and this is also a hero's journey parallel. When a hero reaches their transformative stage, they are a master over life and death. They are coming out of the underworld. They understand more now than they did before. So the healing powers that kind of pop up out of nowhere, it skips a lot to get to that point. So that's something I'm still trying to work through. But if you want to look at it a certain way, it fits that myth of the master over life and death. It's something that, if you want to go on to the mini hero's journey that we have in A New Hope, Luke becomes the master over life and death whenever he shoots the Death Star.
Yeah, chooses to kill millions of people, which he totally did, rather than trying to negotiate with them, I suppose. Why do people care about life and death is anything more than metaphors in Star Wars? I do not understand.
It seems like it's more of and I'll say this, I'm still kind of, I bought the book, The Writer's Journey, by Vogler.
Oh, people are leaning into Vogler and the Hays Code?
Yeah, and you know what? So interesting. And the Hays Code obviously is that's something we don't even get, we can't get into all of that because it's way too much. But let's so in Vogler took the hero's journey by Campbell and try to apply it to make it actually a rubric for writing. And not a lot of people, like, people will use this in, like, college. Like, it's a very introduction to writing this journey, this arc in different types of character arcs with different archetypes. But I was talking to a friend and she said, well, I think that it makes sense that they killed off Ben because if you look at Vogler, every action has another reaction. And if you look at it from... No. Right. So if you look at it from Vogler's perspective, that's what they were trying to do. And I was like, I thought about it for a little bit and I eventually came back with, yeah, but they literally invented the idea of force healing. That was the conflict. That was the action. And then they literally only invented it so that they could kill Ben. They invented force healing as the conflict so that they could take away, so Ben would have to sacrifice his life force. Because no other way would have worked for him to die if we look at it from kind of this Vogler, like, Ben had to die point of view because he killed a bunch of people and therefore he can be redeemed, but he can't live on. He has to suffer the consequences of his actions. So they literally just
what is the
that.
Point of healing the galaxy, and thus it aligns more to the American monomyth concept of what is the lessons that we learn from the story we have just experienced.
Yeah.
I.e., you must suffer the eternal consequences for any action that you have taken in. Right?
Yeah.
Taken on.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to talk about that too much, but her fulfilling that symbolic role was something that we had talked about previously on the podcast. That she would become the master of life and death, but in a goddess form, right?
Yeah.
And I personally don't see that she accepted that as part of her role in the galaxy. And so incomplete heroine's journey from that perspective, because she never accepted her role as goddess, which is what she learns internally and then learns to accept throughout her transformation of the integration of the masculine and feminine. Her role is to be God. And I don't think that and she accepted it.
And just to give context to that, where that comes from, it's not literal God, because the idea that Campbell was trying to get across was that every single hero in every single one of our stories is the god of their own story.
Yes.
Because the whole point is to give the reader the power, right? And that's why so many kids identified with Vader, is because Vader had the power. So it's like this idea that the hero is teaching you to find your own path, find your middle path, and to be the god of your life, almost in a way. And it is, for religious people, that sounds like so like blasphemy. But it's like,
no, but you're supposed to be the protagonist of your own journey, right? Like, it's like that Holiday line. You're supposed to be the heroine of your own journey. You're not supposed to be the best friend.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, Rey was just the best friend because her experiences end up just being a reflection of the men that are around her.
In a fantasy story, these stakes are much higher, where you don't just find your own path and learn, oh, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a firefighter. No, she, like, this hero, and Luke is a hero too, they become incredibly powerful beings that have a power that no one else has, that a power that gods have, like in Legends of Luke Skywalker, how Luke is like seen by the Imperial soldiers to be pulling...
As somebody who could pull starships out of the sky.
Yeah.
Who is a legend.
He is a god to them. Because that is what you're supposed to feel in the story. You're supposed to feel yourself being connected to that power. And, hey, I can choose what I want with my life. I can be the bringer of my own destiny, basically. So
yeah, you have the power to control things, which, in real life we feel we don't have.
Right, exactly.
Right? And this is the choosing your bliss, following your bliss, like on conclusion. You have followed your bliss, and thus you are the master of your life. Mm-hmm. And that's the point.
Exactly. Tell us about the snake and bull symbolism.
Oh, it's dope. So in many of Joseph Campbell's lectures, he actually talks about the connection between love and death, and how things are often paired together. So death and love are paired together in mythological stories. So as an example, he refers to, and I do forget where it's actually from, but I do know the bull symbolism specifically, the lunar bull cult, but the marriage of the snake. And it's something that he talks about. Actually, I think I have the video if you want to actually.
Oh yeah, if you could play
listen to it right now.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Let me grab that up.
They both fighting. Well, just look at a bullfight. The bullfighter is wearing a brilliant, shining garment. He is the solar power, and the bull is the moon power. And these acts of going in over the horns of the bull is the point of danger to the coup de grace, where you knock the bull out here. Similar rituals appear in relation to serpents. I once saw a marvelous film. I wish I could know. It was way back in the early 40s or late 30s. And what it showed was a Burmese priestess in northern Burma who was the priestess of a serpent shrine. And the serpent was a king cobra. This woman had to go up in order to bring rain. She had to enact the sacred marriage with this serpent. And it was enacted by kissing the serpent 3 times on the nose. Now, it was very much like the bullfighter going over the horns of the bull. You sacrifice the bull so that there should be a new period. The past must be killed so that there can be future. This is the bull sacrifice. This is a fantastic thing to see. There was a telescopic camera, and you could follow her going up the mountain to this cave, and she makes a noise, and out comes this cobra. Now, she was a woman, I'd say about so tall, and the cobra comes this high to her. You can see it. And she fixes him just as the bullfighter fixes the bull, then goes over and kisses the nose of this animal, and pooh, and you could see the venom flying all over the place. She had to calm him down, fix him again. She did 3 times, then goes like that. He goes back into his cave. You could see it. This is the bullfight again. I mean, the serpent and the bull, the one who represents the consciousness principle. Marriage and killing are related. The marriage is the killing of your separateness. You're becoming one part of a larger unit. You're no longer the separate one. In Egypt, Osiris begets his hero son, Horus, when he is dead. And when you have begotten a son, you are now secondary. The son is primary, and you're there as a fostering presence. You are no longer number one. And this is death to your primary existence. Do you see? So these 2 things are linked up very strongly. Marriage and death ceremonies have a lot in common.
So when Ray meets the snake, the serpent in the cave, they fall through the sinking sand, they go into the unconscious. She has this moment where she meets the murderous snake, and Poe wants to kill the snake, and Finn's like, no, wait, she got a plan. It's like literally angel devil situation going on here, right? Mm-hmm. She walks up and she heals the snake. So by healing the snake, it is a union with a murderous snake that heals the snake, and then by healing the snake moves out of the way and reveals the light, the escape, the journey forward.
Yeah.
Incredibly symbolic.
Incredibly symbolic because, like, not only does it mean something for her, but it means something for the foreshadowing. What's going to come with when she heals Ben.
And who shows up moments later in his bull TIE fighter, which she jumps over and stabs in the back of the neck or on the wing, taking it down. Death and life together.
I just think about so many things where it broke apart after that. But
it's important to acknowledge that these things happened, and they do have Campbellian roots in that they are calling forth and calling to very specific mythic symbols that are used by other cultures. And yes, it is, if you don't look at Campbell, you can look at this and say, oh, she healed the snake, and that was a foreshadowing to when BB-8 healed Dio. But it has mythic intentions.
Yeah.
You don't pull a snake out like that. You don't pull a snake out of the hat like that without intending to use it in this very Campbellian way. Same with the bullfighting motif, with many people called to. We did an episode on it. Mm-hmm. Specifically, she becomes the goddess, the solar goddess. She becomes the solar goddess, and that is the lunar bull, and she tames the lunar bull.
Yeah.
Like, all of that is in there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Kylo being sacrificial resurrection god, he is the lunar bull that is sacrificed so that life can happen. Had he lived, had they had a family, that cycle of the mythic storytelling would have been complete.
Yeah.
But it didn't go anywhere, but the mythology was there. Ben is also a resurrecting god. He dies like 3 times in the movie, and then to be seen again.
Yeah.
It happens throughout the whole sequel trilogy. He dies so many times and then is seen again. So
yeah.
He is a resurrecting god. The symbolism is very clear. He has the Sacred Heart in his lightsaber. He is healed through acts of love and learns from those changes and transformations. Resurrecting gods are important because they take on the sins and the destruction and all of that and die for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then their reward is that they are eventually resurrected to try again.
Yeah.
But it is the continuous death and rebirth cycle that they are on. That is part of their basically lives.
Yeah, and actually that's the only way in which this would not be the American monomyth, is if Ben is resurrected in the future and is able to, like, continue on as if he didn't die. Like, that is the only way that this... but then you have Rey to contend with. But, I mean, that is a way for... Because, yeah, her ending was a totally other different side of the American monomyth.
Really important to call out. You do not give somebody resurrecting God-type powers without basically saying that they are one of the primary protagonists in the movie.
Yeah.
You don't care about them that way. You don't give them that story. He is his own protagonist.
Yeah.
It's important to acknowledge that.
He ended up being the hero in the most symbolic way. Like, all of the symbols and all of the mythic messaging in this film,
it means that Ben is the hero.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
which is unfortunate because we wanted we wanted both of them to be working together, right?
But this became more like Rey was the secondary hero because her arc was about overcoming her family and her past, which is not, at least from the Campbellian point of view, like, and generally speaking, that's not really a journey of a hero. That's a journey of a secondary character.
Yeah.
They tried very hard to...
Which previously Ben was undergoing, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't care to talk about that. And so his story is to be redeemed, bring hope to, the secondary character. Unfortunately, I don't want to call Rey the secondary character, so I'm not going to. But to bring hope to Rey, who enacts the actions that have been given to her by others.
Yeah.
She presses the button, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Boo. Unintentional symbolism abounds.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about the coolest one ever, lightning hands.
Lightning hands. Okay, so
I do have a comment about lightning too, so don't make me forget.
Okay, good.
Don't let me forget.
I've been trying to research more about this. I haven't been able to find anything yet, but I have a couple of cool books that people recommended me over the past few months or so about like fairy tale for like specifically for women, the underground black market of myth, if you will. What fairy tales, I always call it that. I like that term. But what fairy tales about young women mean for young women and how they're always misinterpreted by like the Brothers Grimm and, society in general. Things like Little Red Riding Hood being a sexual awakening and whatnot. So I'm reading up on that now and eventually going to do a video about that alongside kind of what Rey became at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Because essentially, a lot of women will write, and somebody pointed this out to me, by the way. Someone pointed this out to me recently on Twitter. There's a lot of fanfic and a lot of fiction written by young women who are just starting to write, a lot of self-insert characters. They will write in their self-insert as someone who has lightning powers. And it is so funny because as soon as they said that, I was like, oh my God, my first fic was like the main girl had lightning powers. And I can't believe like how...
It's very prevalent.
I can't believe how, you think about so many female heroines that have lightning powers, and then which characters on the male side have lightning powers are usually villains.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's this idea of this grandiose power that doesn't require strength. It's something that's built out of anger. It's something that erupts out of you because you're holding it all in and it has to eventually come out. And that is the mythic aesthetic almost. It comes out like that in our minds because we see that
you have an overwhelming amount of emotions or not able to control the situation, and it is a method by which that can escape you psychologically, right?
And it's a protection as well. It's like
and it's a great equalizer.
It's a great equalizer, right? Yes.
I don't need to fight you physically. I can zap you from afar. And what's really interesting is the Last Jedi with our young woman insert, i.e. Rose Tico, has lightning powers.
The taser.
She has her taser. She has the ability to level the playing field for herself without whatever powers, right?
Yeah.
Without having strength or anything, she protected the escape pods all on her own.
Yeah, with that. Yeah, and that's the thing is like it to me it comes from this place of such childlike vulnerability, like for little girls. Like if only I could have protected myself from that happening. If only I could have pushed that person away. If only I could have been a ball of electricity in order to keep them from wanting to touch me. So many young girls have had that experience. And for Rey, not only to be given that, I think this is the problem that I have, is that Rey being given that is fine. But we haven't seen anything like that before. It should have, if she had lightning powers, they should have come out when she and Ben were talking, I think. Or it should have come out in like the first
or when
film.
she was a child and she actually maybe destroyed the ship or something like that. Like something where it was like built into part of her need to control things that were out of her control.
And then she would have like tucked that away and it wouldn't have come out. It would have been psychologically locked until something else happened, which
was again symbolically similar. Her parent insert was taken away from her. She destroys the ship, and then they could have.
I never saw Chewie as a parent insert, and so I disagree with this.
I mean, I think that they could have done that if they had actually worked on it.
If they had worked on it, right? It felt weird that it came out with Chewie being in this transport pod, and the fact that he wasn't actually in the transport pod just kind of doubles down on it being ridiculous. But
what I also find very interesting is that she is the first woman in canon to have lightning power.
Did Asajj never develop them?
No.
Interesting.
No, she never developed them.
Well, I hope she uses them after this, because this is where I came to with this is like, first of all, she doesn't use them to fight back against Palpatine. The thing that I thought about the most was in the Avatar: The Last Airbender, how Zuko's whole training was to learn how to redirect the lightning. Mm-hmm. And he does that at the end by jumping in front of Katara to save her, but he doesn't do it perfectly because he does it kind of like last minute and he ends up getting like hurt. But he's strong enough now because he had practiced for so long with the lightning. He's strong enough he can stand against it, you know? So there's all of this like build up there that they didn't even care about with this idea. Respecting the power that you have and learning how to control it and learning what to do with it. That's what makes you a hero. That's what makes you...
And accepting all parts of your power, because who knows when she could get potentially ticked off again.
Yeah.
Or feel out of control. And i.e. Kylo pushing her as asshole-ish and out of character as that movement, that whole scene was contrived to be, actually showed her something that she does not confront in the rest of the movie. And thus to me is her shadow that she has not dealt with, because I'm sorry to say, but you actually have multiple shadows. You have as many shadows as you need to have, because that's how much emotional garbage you end up having and carrying around with you in your trash bag from a Robert Bly perspective.
Yeah. It can be so many things. Mm-hmm.
Lightning in nature is the world's effort to create balance.
Yeah. Ooh, I like this.
Yes. So, in truth, because lightning in nature creates forest fires, which burn down, which create new growth. It is literally the secret, and it is the imbalance between the electrons in the clouds and the electrons in the earth. There's a polar opposite effect, and thus the lightning happens to transfer electrons. Yeah. That is what lightning is that there is an imbalance.
Yeah.
And the unintentional symbolism is just really interesting to see. But that's the kind of funny thing that we need to call to and identify and say, look, you weren't trying to say this, but from a collective unconscious perspective, you did say this. And what does that mean to us?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I will forever be happy that they threw in the lightning powers. Actually, it's something
I think it's cool.
liked. Yeah. And I again, like you said, there's a lot of good things that can come out of it, but they didn't come out of it in the film. What I'm looking forward to is if any woman has the ability, or any other type of creator that's looking to take risks, if they can take on a story of Rey after this film, after this time period. And she uses
both healing and life and death. She has become the master of life and death. If she becomes this goddess of life and death, I will be very, very interested.
Yes, I will be very interested. And I'm also interested in when the film does come out and people are able to make, like, you know, fan films and whatnot, and edits with music and all the cool stuff. I want to see more of her lightning powers. I just really, like, it's such a cool self-insert thing for women. It's such a powerful thing. It's such a power fantasy thing. So I love it.
I mean, she did end up knowing the lightning well enough to redirect it with the 2 lightsabers.
I don't think that was, again, inference.
Okay, sorry. Fine. We're trying to stay away from inference, but what happens observably, and then what does that mean symbolically to us.
Didn't the lightning kill her at the end? Like,
I mean, it did. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Dyad.
Dyad. Okay.
That's a good one.
So a dyad, two in text. A dyad in the force. We are two that are one. Come on, Raylo. Let's go, Raylo. Do, 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 do. It's basically saying that. Like,
Yeah.
come on, baby. We are literally meant to be together. I want to kill Palpatine and be with you. Right? Come on, baby. We're a dyad.
It's basically what
yeah,
he
so
said.
they're soulmates. We know a few things, textually speaking, that that were in the visual dictionary. These things pop up. Oh, like what Palpatine said, like have not been seen in many generations or in a really long time. So this is something that happens in the Force. We don't understand why, but it's important to the Force that there are two that are one.
Yeah.
It's like all of that triangle symbolism that I was always like pointing to is that the concept is that we need our opposite to balance us out. This is the makeup of all great marriages.
Yeah.
Is that you have somebody that not only challenges you, but also loves you unconditionally. Mm-hmm. And that through that, you both walk down the path together in union and become transcendent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is the mythic basis for alchemical union.
Yes.
It ties very much to the alchemical union stuff that we do actually end up seeing the bare bones structure of in the movie.
Yeah.
Soulmates, loves forever, that they're interconnected literally, that they are tied together in the Force through space and time, the visual dictionary says. So it's like, all right, so you gave her a soulmate and then he died.
Yeah.
Okay, so now she's sad forever. Thanks. That's an inference. Sorry.
Yeah.
We don't know what the results are. But we do know that the absence of results is symbolic to say something.
Yeah. Yeah. Campbell talks a lot about like marriage, like obviously, because that's a big part of a big part of myth is marriage. A big part of figuring out who you are is marrying the things that are different from you to yourself. So marrying is the part of marriage that he finds incredibly important. Another part of it is the idea of compassion as opposed to just passion, which I want to get into a little bit in a minute. But I did find where he uses the word dyad, which I thought was kind of cool because I hadn't really heard the word dyad used in like a lot of stories at all. But he does use this word. He says this is in like a conversation in a book that I have now called The Hero's Journey. And it's about his like life's work. So there's like conversations with other people like philosophers and people in literature and whatnot in this book. And a lot of the things that you see Campbell talk about in his lectures are like repeated in this book, which is nice because this is also written towards the end of his life. So you get to see kind of where he ended up. So it's very nice and neat. Good way of being introduced to his whole philosophy, I guess. So someone asked him, Joe, what would you say about marriage as a mythological event? And of course, Campbell would have a lot of things to say about this, but his response here was, my notion of marriage is that if marriage isn't a first priority in your life, you're not married. That's the first thing he said. And then he said, it's an extremely important decision, that of marriage, because it does amount to and require a yielding, and the yielding has to be total to now be a member of a dyad and acting in relation to that two-ness. As I've said to people who are worried about it, when you make what you call a sacrifice to the other person, that's not what you're sacrificing to. You are sacrificing to the relationship. The relationship is a sacrificial field where both of you are relating to the relationship, and then you are, as it were, two together. And then he says, really like that yin-yang thing.
Oh, weird.
So
okay, so he's saying basically a dyad is two married people.
Yeah, he's saying he's saying that's all the same thing, because essentially, and he doesn't even bring up masculine and feminine here. He is talking about
commitment of two people
sacrificing for the idea of two-ness, not for the other person. It's not to die for the other person. It's dying for the dyad.
It's dying for the concept of being together rather than for the other person, because, you know, and something that I've realized over my many years of marriage is that it is constant work.
Constant.
To maintain. Constant. And it is ever changing, ever shifting, but it is the choice to have the journey together.
Yeah.
And whatever that relationship ends up being, anytime that you enter into a manifestation of love and commitment, it is the choice to not be just yourself. It is the choice to be yourself with that other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And this year, as of this year, I will have been married for 5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And together with my husband for 10 years. So, yeah, like it's an obvious.
I've now been together longer with my husband than I have been apart from him.
I love that. I think that's so cool. And that is the two-ness. That is the idea that Campbell had. And a lot of people that are not married or don't want to be married, like I have a best friend who sometimes we misunderstand each other so much, because there is that idea that she does not want to be married. That is not a goal for her. And I have to remind myself of it. There is still something to be found in this. It may not be about marriage.
And it could be friendships.
It could be friendships, but it could also, you know, as ridiculous as this seems, it's incredibly important to marry yourself. Not you, but to marry the different parts of you to yourself, because that is what it is symbolically. That is what a marriage is symbolically. Like, because Campbell talks about, we've listened to it on this podcast before, but the clip of the lecture that he gives where he talks about when you see a woman, or as he is a man talking about this, he says, you know, you see a woman, she looks great, there's something about her you like, you decide, I'm going to marry the creature. But then you get married and you go, oh crap, she is my mother.
She's my mother.
Yeah. So that's when he says, that's when passion changes into compassion, because you have a choice in that moment. Do you give up on the marriage? You know, like, do you live your life in the marriage, but not really loving the person, not really having compassion for the person? Or do you choose to turn the passion that you originally had to them into compassion, and to love them despite all of the things that you see that you might not initially have passion towards, you know? So that's what he says. And this goes into like Annie Dalla into Raylo as being like a progression of passion.
Yeah, overcoming the things that we have struggled with or that we do not love, passion and, you know, willingness to run into hell for what you want, an absolute, you know, can you accept the other person's, you know, qualities fully and completely, even with their negative aspects? I don't know. This is all metaphorical because it is fiction. It is how, you know, the things that annoy me about my husband, you know?
Yeah. And I think the interesting here is, like, you know, the word dyad was chosen for a reason. And I think they did want that to carry weight. They wanted that to mean something and wanted us to think about this. You know, if we were given anything, we were given that. So I'm going to run with this one to the end of time. But this, you know, another quote from Campbell that I wanted to bring up that is so related to this concept of the dyad and Ben and Ray is, he says, the mysticism of love is the writing of the two. That's pretty loaded there. The mysticism of love is the writing of the two. Again, two-ness, this idea of two-ness. They really are one, only they look like two. And the experience is the experience of a truth, an intuitive experience that disregards time and space. Okay, this is getting back to this idea that Campbell has of when you decide to no longer see things in the field
in binaries.
of duals, which is what exists in time, then you have given yourself the ability to transcend. But in order to do that, you not only have to look into the middle, you have to spin inward into yourself. You have to explore your darknesses. You have to marry your anima or your animus to who you are. You have to become more full. And then you can transcend time and space. It sounds so new agey, but it's not. It's actually really simple.
It's the balancing between the two-ness, right? The binary is finding that third path, that third way that they talk about in Buddhism. They talk about in the balance between the light and the dark. It's not gray, because I really don't.
No, because it's not.
I don't like the idea of that, because it's like surfing. You're in the middle of the ocean, and there is the ups and downs of balancing in the ocean and finding your center within that.
But it's you. It's not
the transcendence.
Yes. And it's not. Yes. And a lot of people say, "Oh, but I want to find the true path, the one path." There is no true path. There is no one path. It doesn't exist. It is you. It is who you are. You find it within your center. And that's going to differ from somebody else's, you want to, and that kind of brings us back to like what this whole
and this is the observable symbol.
Yeah.
They talk about it. They show it. It is observable in the movie that they are two that are one, and it's about finding the balance between them that will, theoretically solve the galaxy's problems.
Yeah.
That was what was being said from a dyad perspective. It's literally, even in the visual dictionary, uses the words outside of time and space for this dyad.
Yeah.
Like, it's calling to Campbell textually.
Yeah.
Like copy paste textually.
Yes, it is.
Using the same words means they are trying to evoke Campbell.
Yeah. They're trying. They're trying very hard.
They're trying very hard. We love them for that.
We're trying to love them for that.
I love them for trying. I'm sorry. My bar is so low.
Yeah.
Just tell me the myth.
I get you.
Yeah. Healing creates the opportunity for healing.
Yeah. Oh, I can talk about this a little bit. So
sure.
Earlier I had stated that they had only really invented the whole healing conflict to kill Ben. But, they could have introduced this idea without doing that. And they very well could have not killed Ben through this concept.
In the movie, the healing creates the opportunity for healing, or you hand your power to the next wielder, basically. It is like a handoff. In my opinion, healing creates multitudes of healing, the potential for ongoing healing and things like that. But what they did was they did it like a baton.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like it ended up being like a relay race where one person handing off the baton to the other cannot create exponential healing. There is a limit to the healing ability. And that symbolically means that it is not an elixir.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a plot device.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I said. It was very shortly after seeing the movie and being on Twitter and being in the Twitter discourse. So I had basically gotten upset in a thread, and I said they basically just introduced the idea that everybody has a limited life force in order to kill Ben. And I guess that's not entirely true. There have been other instances in which, like with Luke, for example, he projected himself, he was, I guess, giving up a part of his life force, and he ended up dying because of it. But then I was thinking, like, somebody argued with me about that, and I was like, oh, that's true. But, like, Luke was given an end for, like, other reasons. Ben was given an end because they believed that they had to kill the last Skywalker, even though there were plenty other choices that they had. And I think fundamentally the idea that we disagree with is that the last Skywalker could have lived on bloodline-wise. And I mean,
that all ties to union and how you, by choosing to be with another person, choose to be something else other than what you were given when you were born. I mean, it solves itself textually by allowing the combination of spirit and physical relationship. I.e., dyad, two that are one, choosing the third path.
Yeah.
Symbolically, it solves itself.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
So, yeah. It doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea that healing created healing, the handoff that Rey taught Ben how to heal by healing him. That is the mythic takeaway that we can have,
which is still important. It's the whole like boon out of doing something for the monster.
Yeah,
like the thorn in the lion's paw, and then the lion protects you from something. Or in Jedi Fallen Order, you heal or you protect. You take out a thorn or something out of the side of a giant rock, basically like a world bird, and the bird takes you on a flight where you need to go.
Yeah,
like that's mythically the handoff. You gain something for have given something.
Yeah, and I think that was like the frustration when, like, mythically after Rey healed Ben, he was Ben. Like, he was no longer Kylo. He was mythically he was ready to be redeemed, and he was, but Rey was no longer around. And again, it goes back to like, who's the hero in this trilogy? Well, it ended up being Ben, because if Ben would have been the like healing him should have made him like almost a more mythical character than he was before, because he was healed through magical means. Therefore, he should have become more of a magical, mythical character who could have taken her to where she needed to go, to figure out more of who she was, to help her along the rest of her path. But that's not what happened. And again, it goes back to that idea that like Rey becomes like the side character. She becomes someone for Ben to save so that he can be more of that redemptive character, resurrecting God, and something more I'll talk about when we talk about American monomyth. But it's not Rey's story. It's not.
Well, he died 4 times in this movie because he got stabbed. Sorry, just counting.
You weren't counting the stabbing before?
Oh, no. So
what were you? Yeah, tell me what all you're counting, because I was counting when she.
I mean, he went to the underworld in Exegol, and he emerged.
Well, I was just thinking specifically about the part where he got tossed into the pit.
Oh, sorry. But... Oh, yeah, tossed into the pit, the cutting off the tie, whispers.
Oh, that's one of the ones you're counting. I wasn't counting that.
So yeah, no, I count that because it was a flaming wreck. How did he survive that?
True. Anyways,
so, his life should have ended for 30 times, and he is no longer on this plane of existence the 4th time.
Yeah. God. Yep. Anyways.
Yep.
Rey having a mom
was
the next
very
thing.
Heroine's journey required.
Yes.
You tweeted a lot about this before the movie, and people were like, she doesn't need parents, she doesn't need lineage. And I agree, given what we got. But coming to terms with your mother is part of the heroine's journey.
Yeah. You can that's the big thing of the heroine's journey. Like, you don't have to have a mom. Like, there's a story in Maureen Murdoch's book where she talks about the woman who was born to a mother who had 6 other children, who was too busy to care about her. She was kind of like the runt of the litter, if you will, because that's literally how her mother treated her. And it was very sad and very awful. But this young person, when she left the home, she decided to abandon her mother and the idea as her mother had abandoned her. She left it, and she was able to find her mother in nature and find her mother in other ways, right? However, she still had to sit down one day and parse through who her mother was and how she related to her mother. If she had tendencies that were given to her through her mother, she had to actually think about who her mom was. And this is why it was so important to me to have Rey's mom in this story, was because
it's observable to actually have her in the story rather than maybe having her connect with like the Force's mother or something like that.
Yeah. Like Rey's mom matters to Rey because it's a part of every young woman's journey. If they feel abandoned by their mother, they need to come to terms with that. And Rey did. Like, it was all that was all set up. That was all shown to us. Even if Kylo told her,
they sold her because they sold you because they loved you.
And that was the worst possible choice. That was the worst possible choice, because Rey never got a chance. Like, if they would have actually done her, like, no good. I mean, which they did. It was such a messy backstory, because they were idiots, essentially.
What, her parents?
Yeah,
I mean, uneducated at least. I don't know.
The whole like she's not on Jakku thing. Like, I mean, there was so much that was just very, very messy to me. And the idea that, again, they were supposed to have sold her into slavery. They left her in a terrible, terrible situation. But then they also, like, I don't understand. There's so many other choices they could have made with who her parents were, but they decided this. They wanted to give her 2 parents, totally normal-looking people, loved her, were trying to protect her, were killed trying to protect her. A lot of that stuff is fine, but the way they went about it and the circumstances that she actually ended up in, it makes no sense. It makes no sense to me. And again, it's made even worse by her not dealing with it.
And it's hard to infer what it means because of how mucky it is, I think.
Yeah.
It's hard so people can kind of take what they want from it. Oh, they loved her. Oh, she had parents. Oh, they hated her. Like, there's so many inferences because the symbolism is not clear. The meaning is not clear, in my opinion.
No, it's not clear. Again, yeah, like you said, it's a lot of inference. And again, it's just made worse because she doesn't act upon anything that tells us that she has accepted what happened.
Who her mother was.
Yeah.
What happened. That her parents still loved her. Denial of her parents, because they loved her. They were upstanding, awesome people. And theoretically, you can infer that. But she still chooses to reject everything, which is, again, just as much... because in text in the movie, we do not see her observably take that shadow into herself, which is arguably a massive piece of baggage.
Yes, and this is interesting right here. They messed up tremendously because what they decided to do in terms of like what her shadow eventually became, which was Palpatine, which was her past. What they did is they gave her both Luke's initial backstory and then the twist.
That secret prince. Yeah.
They said, you killed my father. You killed my parents. I am your father. I am your grandfather.
Luke's backstory.
It's literally Luke's backstory. Both backstories. Like,
I want to kill you. No, I want you to be with me.
Yeah.
It's like literally the original trilogy in one movie.
Yeah, but they messed it up.
Yeah.
They messed it up. They did the parallel without drawing upon what that means. They didn't pull the meaning out of it first. They wanted to do this first and then draw meaning out of it. And that is that...
repetition rather than poetry.
Yeah.
Rather than rhyming.
Yeah.
Repetition rather than rhyming, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's messy. It's a messy, unintentional... You can draw whatever conclusions you want from the inferences there, but you can't observably point to the symbol to be able to communicate to others what it means without writing a thesis on what it means for you.
Yeah.
Which is okay to pull inferences from things again.
Yeah.
But again, don't assume anybody will know what the hell you're talking about.
Exactly. Nope. That's a good way to put it.
Because it's your own personal lens that you take with you everywhere you go.
Yep.
All righty then. I love this one because I want to talk about it. Rey's lightsaber at the end of the movie is yellow.
Yeah.
Which is considered to be optimistic by the people that created the color. They were attempting to make it all about optimism and that it's sunshine and light and lollipops. Mm-hmm. That is the color of Ben Solo's true self in his soul.
Yeah.
Unintentional symbolism for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm inferring a lot. But I pointed out months and months and months ago, like 4 months ago, that Kylo Ren's lightsaber is yellow-red. Mm-hmm. They specifically, repetitively point to the fact that it is not all red. Mm-hmm. And we know Ben Solo exists within Kylo Ren inside of the mask that he wears. There is still the light in him. Rey's lightsaber is the color of Ben Solo's soul. Mm-hmm. So she still has him there within her, etc., the memory of it or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's important to recognize that this happened. Yeah, unintentionally or intentionally.
Yeah.
I don't think it was intentional.
No, it's obviously not, because Terrio opened his mouth again. Basically told us that, it's just because it's positive. It's a positive color.
Those are the visual effects people.
Ay. Was it really? That wasn't even Terrio. That was... Wait, so they did not even they didn't even have the plan to... They didn't even... Oh my God. Kill me now.
So I found out something by listening to the Knives Out commentary that Ryan's cinematographer, and I'm going to have to look up the name. Please do point it out to me if I haven't done this. But Ryan's cinematographer is a master of color theory.
Oh, cool.
And so that's who did The Last Jedi. Yep. Director of photography is a... master of color theory, and so that all makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Because there was so much of the color meant so much in The Last Jedi. Because
everything is blue.
Everything is blue. And at first I was like, there might be some blue tints here and there, but no, not everything is blue. And now I've been pulling screenshots for the show to make for thumbnails for What the Force, and I'm like, oh my God, everything is blue. Not even like hints of turquoise. No, it's blue. I don't understand what they were trying to do with this. I mean, I know J.J. Abrams likes blue, but
I like blue.
Again, it's like...
But this is a lot of blue.
It's a lot of blue, and it's not pretty blue. It's just blue. I don't get it. There's too many sets.
Unintentional symbolism. All of this is Force Ghost dreams.
Yeah, none of it's real. It's all in the world between worlds.
Yeah, all in the ether, because the Force Ghosts are blue, and this is all blue.
Oh yeah,
none of it is real.
A lot of the landscape in the Mortis arc, a lot of that was blue. So yeah, we'll just go with that.
Unintentional symbols.
Unintentional symbols,
yeah. I mean, I can skip over the Kylo is not her shadow part.
Yeah.
If you don't.
We talked about it.
Yeah. Alchemical union, and we talked about this a little bit in the moment in talking about the dyad, etc., but it is actually an alchemical marriage symbolically happens on screen when they kiss. So it mirrors the symbol of the two becoming one through the shared face. And actually it like matches it exactly. The woman is on the right-hand side of the picture and the man is on the left. And they look almost exactly like the drawings of alchemical marriage.
And just to like give people the idea again, like what alchemical marriage is, it's like super simple. It literally is just a feminine symbol and a masculine symbol, and that could be a man or a woman, or it could be like a bird and a fish, or like there's plenty of things it can be. And as long as they like touch, they come together magically in some way, or not magically, literally, they have to just come together in some way. That is an alchemical marriage. And it can be very symbolic, or it can be very fantastical. So, yeah.
Yep.
Sun and moon. What else?
The yin-yang symbols.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. And then the idea is that they go forward on the journey together.
Yeah.
Balancing each other out.
They have become the dyad.
They have realized the dyad.
Yes, they have realized the dyad.
They have actualized. We see it observably on screen. How would this have actually played out if it was truly alchemical union? They walked out of Exegol together, riding off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Standing in front of the Tatooine suns together. So this is not me saying happily ever afters are required to complete the myth. No, this was something that happened and then was chosen to not happen. Alchemical marriage, but no alchemical union.
Yeah.
It didn't complete, basically, because you need to have the observable logical end to that, which is that they are together. There is a lot of people that infer that he was sucked into her with giving her his life force over to her, but that is all inference. Textually speaking, you need to use the observable actions that happen on screen. He heals her. She comes back to life. She's very happy. She says, Ben. She holds his head. He's like, oh, you're alive. They kiss. And then he starts to fall down and dies or leaves, evaporates, rises. I don't know.
Well, and another point that I made before we started recording was like, he was already dead before they kissed. So the kiss itself feels like it's not an alchemical union. You can't even say that is an alchemical union because he was already dead.
Why do you say he was already dead?
Because he had already given her his life force.
Oh, okay.
He gives her his life force, then they kiss. She wakes up, then they kiss, then he lays down and disappears. But he had already given, like, he was dead.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, you're right. It doesn't meet the requirements, even though it was there, because it needs to be observable on screen. And the outcome of that is like the logical next steps. They walk out together. They solve the universe's problems together. They create a new future together, i.e. the outcome of the dyad. When do we see this play out? Kind of, so you can compare and contrast. Tangled, she heals him. And they walk out of the situation together, right? There's that really magical moment where she uses her hair and cries and heals him. Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
He transforms in that moment from being the Beast when she tells him that she loves him, and then they kiss, and then there's even more glowing and transformation of the kingdom. The elixir is brought to the kingdom via magical means. And it's very magical and lovely and everything like that. That is the outcome of an alchemical union. You should actually literally see the changes reflected through the galaxy.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
and, just again to like kind of say that this could have worked if both of them died. Yeah. They could have.
Romeo and Juliet, like.
And to make it less tragic, there was, maybe I shouldn't say what it is because I don't want to give it away. I don't want to. This is like the big spoiler of the entire story. But, there is a story in which these two characters who are together, who are married, who are in love, they take up two sides of the dark and the light. And it's in a book series. And they take up those two sides and they are not powerful enough to contain them, but they are powerful enough to bring them together into something new. And the stakes are high enough in that story that they have to die in order to save the world. So when they come together, they have a moment where they realize we're not going to make it, you know? They embrace each other. They disappear, and then the world is saved. And then at the very end, there's an epilogue, and they show up, and there's a note that they wrote from the afterlife that basically says, like, we are together and we are happy, and that this is all that we could do. And then their bodies are like there, their actual physical bodies are there, laying in the grass in the new world that they created. And it's beautiful. And like, for so long, that was my headcanon for like TROS.
What would happen?
Because I thought,
you're like, they're going to go off together and be together, and
or even to that extent, maybe they did have to die. Maybe they both could have died in order to heal the galaxy. If that,
that would have been a really dope sacrifice to have them both die, and that's how the Skywalkers end, because both sides die, but then the healing happens throughout, like maybe like some sort of message is like, we can't continue on, but we need to, but I don't want to rewrite the movie. I just, I'm just pointing out that there are other choices to be made to say this is the integration of the masculine and feminine, and out of that comes the healing. This did not happen. You have to infer that it happened. Yeah.
No, we can't. And that's what I was getting at too, is that this is a story, this is a way where you can heal the world and then move on. And what's really funny is that the end of that trilogy was not the end of the story. There's that's in that universe, they pick up hundreds of years later where those two individuals are gods, or they're seen as gods. Oh. And the people basically worship them. And there's a new trilogy created with new characters in that same world. So I feel like so many, like, where the story can move next, this is still a possibility. Like, this is still something that, like, mythically could happen.
I love Lost Husband Mythic.
Yes.
They could go that
Marie Claire is writing a Lost Husband Mythic fictional story. Or fanfic.
Post-TROS.
Yeah.
It was dope. It was fun.
It's really cool. It's really, really cool. Anyways.
I do want to briefly, the weapon that does the wound must be the one that heals it. I mean, that happened.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a Joseph Campbellinian thing. Like, Kylo gets stabbed by Rey, where he stabbed his father, that heals, and then she's able to heal all of his wounds, including bringing him back to the light as Ben Solo.
Yeah.
That all happened in the most Campbellinian way possible.
Yeah, definitely.
So, cool. That was intentional. I can see that it was intentional to the Campbellinian path. This is where it's very, very weird. It's like these very intentional Campbellinian things where it's like directly from his text are in the movie, and then yet all this other kind of unintentional symbolism happens. Rey is the Skywalker, Rey is Rey Skywalker saga.
Yeah, I love this so much. I kind of sort of made this up, but I mean, I'm sure plenty of people have gotten here too. It's just funny to me because like Rey became, she took the name Rey Skywalker, but since the beginning, I've been saying she became everything. She became Luke. She became even like, you could even give her...
She literally lived Luke's life in the course of one movie. Yeah. Like, okay.
Yeah. But she's also... But you can say that she's Anakin. You could say that she's Palpatine. You can say she's Obi-Wan. You could say she's, Qui-Gon Jinn. Like, you could say she's Yoda.
The whole story lives within
the whole story. All the generations of the Jedi and the Sith. Because like it or lump it, she still destroyed Palpatine. And...
Yep.
All of the stuff, everything that she has his bloodline, and they made that very clear that was like important. She has the powers, therefore she has some Sith stuff there, I'm sure, as well. But everything lives in her. Symbolically, the entire saga has concluded with Rey. And
I mean, people point out like, oh, she is Prime Jedi now.
Yeah, she is. And what's really scary about that is she's like, it makes me think of like the origin of Satan. Sorry. I mean,
sorry.
I know
funny.
it is funny, but it's also terrifying because it's like if they do any more stories about her,
she's untenable.
She's either going to become a Satan and like the Force is like God and she won't bow to the Force, so she's, Satan. Or she's going to be so inhuman that she will be unrecognizable and she will just be pure.
To me, what TROS did, because again, it's like the whole OT, it's like A New Hope all over again. It's very first part of the hero and heroine's journey structurally, right? She goes, she's out on her adventure, finding all of her trials and must defeat the dragons and move on to the next thing. And then the boon of success that she receives is she is Rey Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
Right? That is the boon. But from a heroine's journey perspective, that boon is false. It does not mean anything to her because it does not fulfill her.
Yeah.
Right? We can infer that she has fulfillment from found family, which is still valid. Still valid. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to take that away from anybody that sees that. But to me, and from observable textual statement, she is now I'm every Jedi and every Sith. Like, it's so much. Who can identify with her in the galaxy?
Yeah. She's going to be like...
She's bigger than Luke Skywalker legend. Mm-hmm. She's bigger than that. She's bigger than everybody. And the only options for her are to fade into obscurity and live alone for the rest of her days, or to find her balancing counterpart. That is the only options from a story perspective. There is nobody else that is as powerful as her that could ever understand her.
Yeah.
That I'm not assuming here. I'm telling you what the story is saying. It's like when you have a theme in music and you leave it open-ended, because there is the question of how can she ever be understood by the society by which she lives in?
Yeah.
Or perhaps that is why she's on Tatooine, is to fade into obscurity.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll explain why that is a thing. But, I don't know. I think it's so unfair. My parents have always had this funny reaction to women in stories that are just really, really powerful. But in a very nuanced way, I was actually kind of surprised when I was talking to them about this was, I was like, well, they made Rey into everything. She's everything. She's all powerful. And they said, well, they do that to a lot of female characters. And I was like, no. But we talked about it more, and it is true in a way that, especially when it comes to men writing women, they feel like they're correcting something. We said this movie felt like a bunch of corrections. I feel like it was correcting a bunch of stuff. Men tend to write heroines as correcting what they feel shameful about, and they want to give that heroine everything that the male heroes didn't have, but they do it from a power perspective as opposed to what the character actually wants perspective. So I feel like that's maybe that's an underlying psychological thing that, has happened here. I don't really know, but women didn't want this.
It's unintentional that they did this, I think. I don't think that they intended to say, Rey, now you're everybody.
But not that she's everybody, but it was intentional that they said she has more power than any other person, any other Jedi that's come before her.
Yeah, she's untouchable. She's become the goddess.
Without her counterpart. Goddesses have counterparts.
Yes. And that's not to say that goddesses can't rule and aren't cool and all that stuff, but literally every goddess, because you need the masculine and the feminine as balance.
If they're going to be that powerful, yeah.
if they're going to be that powerful. And like literally Kali, when she is on her vengeance dive and destroying the world, it's Shiva that comes out and calms her down. And when Shiva's being an idiot, she slices him down. Like it's that counterbalance aspect of these unknowable figures. But now she is unknowable and alone, which is a supervillain creation story.
Exactly.
Odd choices made.
And then again, the music at the very end lends us to believe that as well. That creepy, childlike tune at the very end sounds like, oh, but what's going to happen now? What's going to happen next? Like, she's going to be the next villain. Like, in my head, like, oh, she's like, all right. But, which I guess I wouldn't be upset about, because at least that would make sense to me. At least that would be like, something different.
This is the logical conclusion.
Yeah. But that's probably not what's going to happen. Yeah. If Rey shows up in another story, she's probably going to be a hooded Luke. Like, she's going to look like how Ahsoka looks. Like, as the last time we saw her in canon, hooded with a staff, Gandalf type character.
Yeah, you end up becoming like a recluse nun.
Yeah. Of a supposed matriarch now, which, hopefully we can...
The Skywalkers were always a matriarchy.
Yeah, and somebody compared Rey to Shmi, and I don't like that, BT dubs. I'm not a fan of that at all.
I also, unintentional symbolism and body horror. She's pregnant.
Oh, God.
And thus actually Shmi.
Like,
Skywalker.
Who came up with that? I want to thumb wrestle you and hurt your thumb, because that's just...
Well, Liam mentioned it.
I don't even know where that...
There's the touching your stomach that is an impregnating move symbolically. It's unintentional. I really do not like the idea of, they did it once in the saga, I just became pregnant, Shmi Skywalker says, but I don't like the idea of it.
It would have been fine if Rey would have been born of the same thing, because at least that would have shown us like, hey, the Force was trying to correct the imbalance.
Something. Yeah. We don't need to see it on screen.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I don't think they would have done that. I don't think that was intentional. If somebody goes back retroactively and adds that in, I'm going to despise it, because that is just not... No, don't make it any worse than what it already is. Like, Rey is already... She's been given everything. She doesn't also need to become a Virgin Mary. That's just not fair. She wasn't supposed to be that. That we were supposed to get a heroine who... Her hair was falling down. She wore dark colors. She was exploring her darkness. She was touching the villain. She was sympathizing with the villain. And then she becomes this white, angelic, mythic, never gets dirty, all of the powers possible that anybody in the saga has ever had. So
she herself as Rey bears all the consequences of everything that has ever happened.
Because that's what that means. That's what it means. That's what it meant for Ben. That's what it meant for Luke. Like, if that's what it means for Rey too. Like, she's screwed.
Yeah.
And if they continue to go on, like, I just find it sexist, like, not to have her be screwed at the end of this. That was unintentional. But
Speaking of unintentional symbolism...
Like, I just find it, it's unfair that, like, the woman has to be this angelic, untouched, virginal figure that doesn't have to face the consequences of the past. But Ben had to, and Luke had to, and Han had to, and Leia had to. That's just not fair.
Mm-hmm.
Padme had to. It's a double standard.
Shmi had to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, everybody. And now they've made her something that is not other. She is other. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. They wanted to create a heroine, but
and you can infer heroism, and we will talk about that from the American monomyth and how that does happen. But if, as you can see, there was very specific Campbellian monomyth ties, using the same words, using the same symbols, etc., one would expect the outcome to have a full cycle elixir, changing the world, bringing it back to the community with the lessons learned, the magic of rebirth, and the transformation being communicated to the larger community in the story, and thus us. And we know that other stories within the larger Star Wars story tie to this. The Mandalorian completed a full hero's journey with an elixir. The community by which he started in was made better because of the journey that he went on for the first season. Jedi Fallen Order, Cal makes decisions that actually make the galaxy better. I'm not going to spoil the end or anything like that, but in that they do found family very, very well, and show the found family that you can find along the way, including incorporation of the darker aspects within ourselves and accepting those and moving forward with love.
Yeah.
Jedi Fallen Order is one of the most amazing Star Wars stories we have gotten in the Disney era. Vader Immortal, the lessons learned from trying to not go about holding on to the past, learning from it, incorporating it, understanding it, and taking forward your power into the future for your next adventure. It's all in there, in all of these stories. In this Disney era, they have done so many amazing Campbellian monomyth stories that involve the elixir. And in The Rise of Skywalker, we didn't get it.
Because they were trying to correct what had come before. The creators were not telling a story for themselves. They were telling a story that they believed appeased the fans, that fixed what had happened with The Last Jedi. It's very apparent now, the more I think about it, because all they had to do was work off of the previous story, and they explicitly chose not to do that. There's enough contradictions for us to say that they chose that intentionally. So that messes everything up. I mean, from a writing perspective, you can't do that.
Well, no, you can, but then you have about 50% of the audience being like, eh.
I mean, 50% of the audience
right.
50% of the audience doesn't, like, I don't think TROS was a success by any means. The numbers, the reactions from the fans, even just the stuff I've seen where people say, like, the trending posts for anything related to Star Wars is about hating on Reylos. And most of those people say, I have never seen a Star Wars, but... I'm sorry, but the people who liked this film are they don't really care. They thought it was a fun action film. It solidified the fact that, like, Star Wars should only be a pew-pew film. It should be fast-paced, whatever. Like...
No, I mean, like, that's general audience. There are legitimately people within the fandom that liked and loved this movie, and it spoke to them on a variety of ways, right? But they are choosing to infer things and meaning. And I want to be very clear about that, and that's okay.
Yeah. I find meaning in really awful, terrible, dumb media all the time, and I will defend it to my dying day, and that is totally fine for people to do. But, like, you have to recognize that it's not the general takeaway. Your personal experience and your personal relation to a story is not gonna be the general takeaway for it.
It's not gonna be the found meaning of, say, i.e. redemption in Star Wars, or hope, or it's not going to be your inferred lens is only explainable through, long Twitter threads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You have to explain why it means something to you. You can't just say, wasn't this moment powerful? You can do that with certain aspects that touch on the mythic nature of the movie, i.e. the working together between the union of Ben Solo and Rey. When they pass the lightsaber back and forth, that's their dyadness coming to fruition, right? So you can see it come out in the movie, and then that becomes part of the social, cultural, and consciousness to say, "Oh, that was actually really good," right? That was good. And then the unintentional symbolism of the fact that, Rey and Kylo were not good or whatever together also comes out.
Yeah.
Because they didn't go full in one direction or another. Back to my analysis episode with Ty, they split the baby. Yeah. And so you can infer whatever you want to infer from this movie.
Yeah.
Because they chose to make a choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets it back into the idea, like, if you don't...
I am not ruining your love of Star Wars if you have stuck with me this long to say I have genuine critiques about this movie, that you have to choose to be brave when you are handling the myth. It is scary when you're dealing with the collective unconscious. Owning the myth, i.e. like Disney and Lucasfilm does, means that you have to bravely run into Exegol like Ben Solo after the bliss. You have to be brave. Yeah. If you are not brave and you go half-seas like they did, and we're going to go into the half-seas part here, then it ends up being like, and it won't resonate. That's the key, is that when the myth happens correctly, it resonates. Yeah. And it might not be the most popular movie. It might not be the most popular thing, but I have an example. There's a heroine's journey musical. I did an episode on it with Rachel from Scavenger's Hoard over a year ago. I was in London and visiting people, and I went to go see the Mythic, the musical, which is a retelling of Hades and Persephone. And they originally only planned on having it on for a month, and they ended up extending it for 3 months. Because it was so popular and so many people wanted to see it. And it tells the heroine's journey, i.e. the journey, because it's heroines and hero's journey kind of do the same thing, just from different perspectives. It told it so well that it's incredibly popular. And now I think they're upping it in New York and stuff like that. And it is a smaller production. It is a smaller musical. It is these things, but it resonated so much. People just wanted to see it more. Yeah.
That's what happens. And no one will remember. TROS will become a bookend to the saga. It's not going to be very memorable. I don't think it will be. There's nothing in it. There's no ultimate message or meaning.
I think it will age where you can watch it and take what you want from it. But I don't know it's going to be the thing that people are going to be like, I must rewatch this to experience the myth. I'm like, because that's the thing, like the myth retold is part of the ritual of experiencing the myth, is like, I must watch all of the saga to experience the saga. And that's what we were experiencing as these movies were coming out. I must do my rewatch, right? It's the ritual of doing the rewatch, and everybody's tweeting about their rewatch experience. Like the rewatch is part of the experience. When Mar doing her tweet through of the rewatch is part of the ritual. But has this changed the outcome because of the mythology not successfully completing? Well, it just means that actually it's open still, because they didn't complete the myth. So as soon as they decide to, then it becomes part of the rewatchability of it. I don't know.
Yes. Correct.
Okay.
Sorry. I just like...
Let's go into the American monomyth again in a little bit more detail. We actually got lots of questions about it. And I encourage you to research this yourself if you're interested. It is something to be very aware of when you watch media.
It's something to be very aware of. And I'll give you a little bit more. I've been reading more about it. I've been skimming more, doing more in-depth reads, making highlights, taking notes, whatnot. I've put it into my recent video. So this book, the thesis was originally written in 1977, which is fascinating because, that's Star Wars time. But it was rewritten in 2002 by an author, and he brought somebody else on board to help him continue on what this myth meant in the modern day as of 2002. It's called The Myth of the American Superhero. That is the name of the book. That is the 2002 book. It was written by John Shelton Lawrence and Robert Jewett. And they are proponents of the Campbellian myth. They studied it. They had, researched a lot. They really dug into like what is the Campbellian myth, and the idea that Campbell was always wrestling with, which was, has this myth continued on in the Western world? Like, do we have myths in the West? Campbell always said that movie makers are not myth makers. Mm-hmm. He was very clear about that. But then when he was invited, when he was invited to Skywalker Ranch by George Lucas and saw Star Wars, he watched them all in one day, by the way. I don't know if people know that, but he said watched, they watched like A New Hope in the morning, Empire Strikes Back in the afternoon, and then The Return of the Jedi in the evening. And he said he was exhausted. He's like, I was just so exhausted, because he doesn't watch films usually. He doesn't watch movies. Mm-hmm. He had said that after he had left the U.S. to go to Europe to work on his mythological studies, he had come back, and he had left during the time of the black and white, no talking films. He came back for the talkies, and he said that the talkies had instituted a new era of naturalism, and we had decided to forgo metaphor, and he didn't like that. So he had just basically stopped watching movies.
He zoned out.
He was like, oh, you don't, like, there's no metaphor in the talkies. I don't want to watch these. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, George Lucas encourages him to see what he has inspired. So Campbell watches them and says, okay, maybe there could be this new era. And I think one of the last books that he wrote was about space, because he had seen this myth of Star Wars, and he had seen what it meant for man to think about going into space. And he thought, maybe that's where the new myths are. Maybe it's about space. So this was all the end of Campbell's life. There were so many things that he was inspired by. Didn't quite hit any of them on the head. So these two guys came along with the idea that the American monomyth doesn't finish the monomyth as analyzed by Campbell. They analyzed what Campbell was doing, and they basically found in their research that due to many things that American beliefs had evolved into as of the 1970s, and then also as of 2002, the American myth was unable to bring the hero back home for a variety of reasons. And just to summarize again, the American monomyth is when the hero goes out into the world, goes into the supernatural world, he succeeds in defeating some kind of bad spirit, bad force, and then they come back from the adventure with the power to bestow boons, bring the elixir back to his fellow man or his community. But in the American monomyth, it was analyzed that the community is a paradise. It's kind of like Eden, because it's like, kind of goes back to our puritanical Christian beliefs. And the idea of American exceptionalism, where we see the country of the U.S., like the landscape of the United States, is a paradise. And this paradise is threatened by the other, which can take the form of immigrants, whatnot. So this community, this paradise, is threatened by evil. Normal institutions, being like the government or whatever, fail to contend with the threat. A selfless superhero emerges to renounce temptations and carry out the redemptive task. Aided by fate, this decisive victory restores the community to its paradise condition. The superhero then recedes into obscurity. The crazy thing about this idea, so first of all, it doesn't end in the hero going back to the community. They commit so much violence through trying to cleanse the community of the bad of the other, that their redemptive task is to take on that evil on themselves and then take it out of the community. So they have to commit violence inevitably, but violence is still bad, right? So they eventually have to atone for that by not being able to get what they want, by not being able to get to be a part of the community, by disappearing into obscurity. This is Superman. This is like every Western hero. There's a great chapter in the book about the Matrix. Matrix follows it to a T, and it's awesome. As much as I like the Matrix,
I mean, horror stories, like horror movies and stuff follow this too, right? Like,
in a way.
But like the later versions.
In a way. Only because it follows it on a small scale, I would say. But this is more so about the superhero. It's about people with extraordinary powers. And the men in these stories have a strength. They have a power that, again, like I said, it's a strength that can kill. It's a violence. And therefore, they can cleanse the community of other bad things, other violence is happening, but they themselves are committing violence. So they have to be redeemed for that. And they usually are redeemed by a woman who is the redeemer, who forgives the man and like cleanses him of his sins. They act as angels.
Yeah.
And that is a heroine figure. And even if the heroine is the main character of the story, I talked a lot about Heidi in the previous when I talked about this, because both the hero and the heroine in this monomyth are sexless. Like they don't get to have sex. They do not get to have sexual relations at all. And in fact, like, think about when Superman took Lois Lane into his, Ice Palace to finally have sex with her. He got rid of his powers to do so, but then he was like immediately punished for it because now he's a fleshy man. He doesn't have powers anymore. And so now he has to choose between having powers and having sex. Or, like, because that's symbolically, that means that he has to choose between being a human that wants relationships and just wants to like live a normal life, or if he wants to save the world.
Because you cannot have it all in the American monomyth.
Not a man or a woman. You cannot have it all.
Nobody can have it all.
Women are consistently, like, being an angel and being pure, you cannot have a relationship. You cannot have sex. God forbid you have sex. And on top of that, again, they're sacrificing in order for the community to be saved. And that's, because the community is a paradise. The community is perfect.
Yes. Yes, there is this idea that America is perfect in it, like the home. The home is perfect. It does not need to change. And so there's all this nostalgia mythology to do with it must remain in its perfection from the past.
Yeah, it must be. Yes, it cannot change. So this is, so let me, there's a couple of quotes in here that I think are really important. These are different from the ones I read last time. So they say, in place of human maturation gained through self-understanding, exertion, and suffering instead of robust freedom and responsibility, these stories promise that super agencies will solve our problems and make us happy. This is a true religious opiate, more potent and more illusory than the targets aimed at by Marx and Freud. They go on to say, like, what message do these stories offer to the poor, the defeated, the frustrated, and the disappointed? Because essentially, again, like, what it's saying is that you're going to be saved by numbers or you're going to be saved by power, right? Those are the only two ways.
Like, so like the idea is that the leader will emerge who has the power and is like the figure, the paragon, right? Putting our faith in the man who has the power.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Rather than we are our own heroes.
Yes.
We are the heroes of our own journey. And we, as individuals, farm boys, peasants, princes in disguise, unknown princesses who complete the hero's journey, have the ability to change the world themselves. Anyone can be. It's very democratic in its origin from a Campbellinian perspective, whereas the American monomyth is putting your faith in institutions, power, and paragons.
Yes. And that's where the mythic dissonance comes in, because the whole book is about how this is entirely it's not democratic at all. It's very anti-democratic. So they eventually say that these patterns basically show a mythic dissonance. In the United States, the popular myths might be expected to sustain the leading ideals and institutions of a culture, but the American monomyth consistently undermines the democratic ethos. There's also an interesting part where they talk about communal and family leaders and how the myth affects them. It says that those who identify with the Redeemer figures and seek to emulate their feats in real life will find the targets of redemption are not as easy to change as one might expect. And this is really interesting. They get into how the would-be heroes and heroines are hurt by this mythic structure, because it's almost, if you act like this in real life, basically, you're acting very manipulatively. You're acting like they said it's pious abnegation, well-devised tongue lashings.
I.e. telling people what they should like from a fiction perspective,
Yes.
attempting to redeem the internet of all of its sins.
Oh, this is exactly where I'm getting at. So let me read this quote.
Are you trying to say that being in each other's business and telling people what to do on the internet is an outcome of the American monomyth?
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm trying to say. And I'm going to use this a lot going forward because I'm sick of it. But this quote's great. The manipulative techniques of pious abnegation and well-devised tongue lashings rarely evoke the miraculous transformations that are promised by the myth. They're more frequently the source of additional alienation. But since an illusion of perfect selflessness is essential to the redemptive scheme, the mythic alchemy denies one's personal motivations in order to mask manipulative campaigns. The myth teaches those seeking to emulate superheroes not to place their cards on the table, not to admit their own emotional needs, and to always assume the attitude of the injured servant when thwarted. We're creating villains. We're creating people that they don't listen and they think everyone is their enemy because they think if anybody's gonna... It goes back to the Ayn Rand philosophy, which is a whole other thing, but it's this idea that we are singular, we are important, everyone should listen to us just because we are. It is the end. It is getting at the heart of what the hero's journey is without actually doing the journey. Because if you have to spiral into yourself. You have to experience it. You have to come out of it and want to give that wisdom back to others. But the American monomyth is you're not actually learning the wisdom. You're not actually gaining that. Because if you were, you would be able to give something back. All you are doing is being a martyr. All you are doing is saying you're taking a stance for what is true or what you believe is true and right and good. And then you're trying to force that on others just by being louder and trying to gain power in order to do that.
I love the quote from The Dark Knight. And I know like people, this has become part of our social unconscious, but it really does define what it is to become a hero in the American monomyth if you live, right? Is you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain, you know?
That is the American monomyth. Like, if it's...
It is, because you have no way to integrate back into the community with the knowledge of life and death.
Because...
And that's the elixir, is that you must bring back and tell people how to live and that you can die.
Exactly.
But that you do not need
to. And you can die and bring it back. Yeah. And there's plenty of ways for it to end and there's plenty of ways for people to die, but you have to bring that back to people. The whole thing is just like, it's explaining to me so much. There's an entire chapter about Star Wars that basically says that the Star Wars myth has always been the American monomyth because it hasn't ended. But when we saw that it had not ended, when we went back and we read Campbell, and I'm not just saying we as in me and you, I'm saying so many of us.
It's open-ended. Look, they haven't brought back the elixir yet. Look, he was in the underworld from an Anakin's perspective, and now he has to come back and become the little boy that he always was. Like George Lucas talked about what his 9 movies were meant to be. And yeah, they were blank on a piece of paper, and he was still working through them in the 80s and the 90s. And, he decided to start the journey and show what it was like to fall as a villain and end up in the underworld, literally in your own armor as a walking coffin. That is what Anakin's experience is in the original trilogy. He is a walking coffin. He is in the underworld. He is a dead boy in armor. What we needed was the return.
Yes.
And Ben Solo as Anakin surrogate was supposed to be that. That's what we saw. He is coming back from his journey. And Rey herself was on her own story to redeem the Skywalker line.
Yeah.
That is what we saw, right, from the first 2 movies, and taking into consideration all of the story up until that point, episodes 1 through 8. The bare bones of the structure of completing the Campbellian myth are literally baked into the movie. You can't deny them. You're like eating the pie and you're like, there's a bone here. You're like, if you go and see the movie and you're like, that was a fun, tasty pie, but there's still these Campbellian, like what was that snake all about? And, what was that kiss all about? It's because it was supposed to be a different thing. It was a different pie to begin with. But I mean, we have what we have. It doesn't mean that the myth can't complete. It just it's going to take some iteration to get there. But Star Wars has done iteration before, so okay, I'm interested to see what you pull out of your hat. Now. Is it a rabbit?
Yeah, it would have to be.
Woo! And then it completes the myth, right? Like that's. I mean, the thing is, the Jedi killer, and this is something I just need to say, and then we can wrap up the episode because I think we got where we need to go, unless you have something else. Good. The Jedi killer and Kira being star-crossed lovers who end up resolving their differences and falling in love and overcoming the family trauma that had been forever in the works was baked in from the earliest parts. The Jedi killer was literally one of the first things they talk about in the visual dictionary as something that had been from the earliest drafts. Him and Kira, before she was Rey. And they opened it up to be women of color for a casting call. And it could have been any woman that could have fulfilled this story. And actually, in so many ways, I wish it had been a woman of color because then we wouldn't have gotten Rey Skywalker. We wouldn't have gotten Rey Palpatine, Rey Skywalker speculation right from the get-go because she had brown hair. And obviously, she's Luke's daughter. If she had been just nobody that we knew.
Yeah.
It could have been easier potentially, but the alchemical union was baked in from the beginning. All of these outcomes of them being a dyad, being interconnected, you don't do the things you did in TFA and TLJ without having that plan from the beginning. Like, it was obviously enemies to lovers from the beginning. Like, there's like literally like full theses written on the internet about this. And you cannot say the same for people who are like, they're not lovers. There's just no observable symbols to say that that's the case.
Definitely. Yeah, it was always there.
So it was always there. They chose not to do that. That's fine. They can still complete the myth if they want to. But that's the point of this critique, right? The mythos is muddled. And the consequences play out in the other mediums that we experience Star Wars within. We see the consequences of that in how people are touching it and experiencing it. And I don't know that people see it that way necessarily, but hopefully you've come along on the journey. And I mean, mourning is all about it, but I've moved on to, well, now I get my mythos from the Clone Wars, which is incredibly mythic. Now I get to play Jedi Fallen Order, which is itself and the journey itself, right? And that's the thing. Like, it doesn't need to be this story to experience the myth, but this story experiencing the myth with a female heroine was incredibly significant for us. And it now is a missed opportunity. Essentially, TROS is just the start of another heroine's journey for Rey, because she's going to find that holding all the power of the Rey Skywalker saga in her is untenable.
Yeah, it's too much. She's going to have to figure out her place in the masculine world with her new powers. And she didn't even get to really start that journey in TROS. So, yeah, she's on a new heroine's journey that we probably won't get to see.
Doesn't mean that people can't write it. I'm writing one. So.
I hope I will be ready to read fan fiction in a few months. I hope the stories will be out there. I'm
happy you're reading mine.
I can do that. That's what I need right now. But Rey's story is a little rough. But anyways.
It's all good. It doesn't mean that I don't have hope.
I have hope. The Mandalorian is magnificent. It's so good, and it's so mythic, and it's new, and it's different, and I love everything they're doing with it. It's the proof that you can do something different while maintaining the monomyth and while maintaining Lucas's ideas and also fan service
and completing it successfully and pulling in all of these things, but then also saying new things. Like Quill and the IG-11 story transformed our understanding of droids. Definitely. And I can't wait to do an episode on IG-11 and what he is, right? From an understanding of what droids represent in the galaxy, because it's one of my pet passions is the droids of the galaxy and how it changed. Like Mandalorian changed droids. I have a new rule to add to my list of droid rules. I'm so happy. It's fascinating. I love when that happens. And I was so ready to just love TROS. Warts and all. Could have been broken, etc. if it had completed the myth. And that's where I struggle. But iterative storytelling of Star Wars can change and transform it and allow it to exist sympathetically rather than oppositionally.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. I think that's...
Yeah.
It's a good note to leave off on, I guess.
Yeah. Ty, you have a new video that just came out. Where can people find you? What is your video all about?
Yeah, my video is about how TROS has... Do I want to use the word broken anymore? I don't know. How TROS really just breaks the myth and how it doesn't continue on the Campbellian myth. It's basically a lot of this conversation that we've had without going into the specifics in the film. It's a lot more general. So yeah, you can find that on YouTube at Wit and Folly. And you can follow me on Twitter at black_TYM, and I will have that video probably on my pin. So I hope it turns out well. It's all about Campbellian monomyth, why it was really important, and then how the myth has been changed. That's probably a better way to say it. But yeah.
That's a good way. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming along on this Power of Myth and Symbolism episode, the mythos of TROS, and look forward to more conversations with Ty, because we're going to do a Mythic deep dive into the Mandalorian.
Yeah,
next.
That's good. So, that'll make me happy. That'll be much less of a downer.
Yeah. Just as an FYI, I'm moving on from TROS. I'm not going to talk about TROS for a very long time after this. And I just need some time and some space and to hug teddy bears that are not made out of knives. Generally speaking, Mandalorian-shaped ones, Clone Wars-shaped ones, book-shaped ones, and then I'll probably have to pick it up again with the Rise of Skywalker novelization when that comes out in March. So enjoy the space and effort of not talking about TROS for a while. It may come up in conversations just tangentially, but the focus of episodes will no longer be on TROS. So
cool.
There you go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music composed by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com. We'd like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, Susan, Jessica, Brad, Black Eyed Lily, Anna Perez, How Rude, Macau Mom, Neil, and James. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or your other pod app of choice. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are available in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.